One. Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today in the co-captain's chair, once again, Mr. Martin Popoff for a little discussion on Pantera.
Yes, morning, Pete. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So we're going to tackle all the Pantera studio albums, the early ones and the later ones, 9 in total. This was actually a good exercise to go through. And one thing I do want to say, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to be watching that may have never heard those early albums pre-Cowboys from Hell. And I will say, there's some really good stuff on those albums. And I will also say that those albums come with this glam metal tag. I never quite got that. I think those albums are a lot heavier than all these, people are lumping it into some kind of category. And I honestly, I wonder if half the people who call it glam metal have never heard these albums, because these are actually pretty decent albums, very naive for what they are, but we're going to get to that as we kind of go through. But, a completely different band from, one half to the other. And I think that's also needs to be kind of, talked about here, how much they changed over the span of a very short time. So I will have Martin kick us off with his number 9.
All right, so I'm going to need you to hold up these early ones because I don't have copies of them. So my number 9 is Metal Magic, the debut album, okay? July 10th, 1983. Totally agree with everything Pete just said. And see, you look at that album cover. So part of the reason this glam metal thing and basically considering them really sort of amateurish is the horrible cover art. And the fact that the guys, they're super young. I think Diamond's like 16 on this album or something. I mean, really, really young. And Vinny's not much older. But basically, and they had, they have some of the pictures on these records that have a little bit of a glam look. But anyways, yeah, Rex is called Rex Rocker and all this kind of thing. So 1983, this is Terry Glaze singing this, but it's, as Pete says, I mean, this is not particularly glam. It's essentially like one of the first 10 studio albums by bands on Shrapnel Records, one of the first 10 studio albums by bands on Metal Blade, except for Trouble and Slayer. The other ones, the meat and potatoes, mid-metal, poverty metal bands, right? That kind of stuff, right? So that's what this sounds like. It sounds like Hawaii, basically, right? It's pretty fast. It's technical. It's not terribly produced, but I've got it ranked at the bottom almost because of the production is not the greatest on this. This is the Abbott's dad producing these albums, Jerry Abbott, right? But yeah, it's got a little bit of nascent thrash on it. Metal Magic, the song. Widowmaker has an awesome riff on it. Nothing on But the Radio's got some kind of decent melody to it. Sad Lovers, kind of like a big slow stomping one. But yeah, just generally, this is not at all naive actually for 1983. I mean, for American bands, this is like late in new wave of British heavy metal, and there's some stuff over there that kind of feels a little more with it and together and like on the ball, because that's almost like the end of an era over there. But over here, this basically fits anything on Mike Varney's label and on the U.S. metal compilations. It's actually better than most of that stuff. So yeah, number 9, worst one, and not even a terrible album, Metal Magic.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This stuff is a lot better than a lot of the other more known bands at the time that we were all buying and listening to. And that's the crazy thing. And for those folks who have never heard these albums, you definitely should, because I think there's a lot to enjoy here. And it's just as solid as a lot of the other bands coming up at the time. So I'm going to go with I Am the Night from 1985 as my number 9. Again, I dig all these albums, and it was kind of hard to rank the early ones because they all have their similar misgivings, and the production on most of them is not too good. But you hear this young band really trying to find their sound. This is a strong album. This is the last album with Terry Glaze on vocals. Not a bad singer, right? I mean, I think he kind of fit them. Hot and heavy, good thick guitar tone. Dime totally rips it up on the title track here, which has a little bit of the Van Halen feel. And you can, his big influences were Ace Frehley and EVH, right? And you can hear them a lot.
I'm wearing the vintage Kiss for Dime here. There you go.
Yep. You can hear his influences all over these albums. That's kind of cool. Onward We Rock is good. Down Below, Right on the Edge has some pretty terrific riffing, but kind of a terrible chorus. Some of the melodies in the choruses on these earlier albums, a little suspect, but Valhalla's a great song. Here's the guys right there. I wanted to show this picture of them early on. All right, so they got that kind of like Jeffrey Dockin kind of look there, right? Because it is 1985, but good album, fun album. I think all these early albums are, you can kind of classify that. And it's just amazing. You listen to this, and then you listen to Cowboys from Hell, and it's like, is that the same band?
Yeah. Interesting, because my number 8 is I Am the Night. So that's pretty interesting. We both ranked that one pretty low. And I think I was trying to figure out why I wanted to rank it low. And I think it's because it's a little tired and wet sounding. It's got a lot of reverb on it. It's not my favorite. It doesn't have the bite to it. It almost feels like the work of a band that's a little uninspired with this direction that they've been on for 3 albums. I mean, when you get into Metal Blade, it's really like that kind of Metal Blade malaise in 1985, 86 with like, I don't know, what do we got there? Obsession and Lizzie Borden, and later on with who do we have on Shrapnel at that point? Culprit, that sort of thing, where it's like you're looking for a little bit of a direction. It is 1985, August 16th. Metallica's happened with 2 records at this point. So there are some big advancements happening in metal that they're probably looking askance and going, that's kind of interesting. Slayer's by 85 has got at least a couple albums out, right? Anthrax has arrived. Megadeth is arriving right around this time. So, I think it just feels like a little uninspired in the writing. It's got some annoying background vocals on it. One cool thing, it's got a song called DGTTM, which is a named solo. So this is like almost an homage to Eddie Van Halen and Eruption kind of thing. Eddie was obviously a big inspiration on Dime. So yeah, there you go. We both found a way to put this one fairly down.
Yeah. I find some of the, like I said, some of the main melodies in the chorus is a little uninspiring, kind of lacking on that particular album, which is why I ranked that one lower than this one, which is my number 8 is Projects in the Jungle from 1984. I mean, look at that cover right there. There's the guys on the back. Yeah. So this album, actually, it's funny because this album sounds really different than the other 3 that came right around it. I mean, I hear like a massive, like On Through the Night and High and Dry Def Leppard influence on this album, particularly in the choruses. It just and even the guitars have that kind of feel. So it's just interesting because you don't hear that on any of those other albums. But I think Dime is really starting to come into his own on this album. You got the All Over Tonight song, which is a really wild track. Lots of great guitar solo. And you got Out for Blood. Blue Light Turning Red is Dime's other eruption moment. So he did a couple of these on these early albums where he would just do an unaccompanied guitar solo. And, you listen to it and you're like, okay, this guy can shred, right? This guy's pretty damn good. Like Fire almost sounds like a outtake from Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil album. So again, here they're kind of like, almost like mimicking a lot of things that they're hearing around them of these other bands that are breaking really big. In Over My Head again reminds me a little bit of Def Leppard. And then you got Heavy Metal Rules, which is a really fun headbanging tune, probably the heaviest song in the album. Good, it's fun album. Production's not very good, obviously. Most of these aren't, but I dig it. I think it's kind of cool.
Cool. All right. My number 7, I went with power metal. So I went with the first album with Phil. Phil joins the band. This is their 4th album, May 20th, 1988. There you see their look. They've kind of got a standard thrash band look to them. Now Phil with the hair hanging over like that, he's already showing kind of his extreme hardcore kind of look. But I played this record and I basically was really annoyed with Phil's vocals on it. Phil really has that, he still does it on the major label albums at the beginning a little bit, but he really has that shrieky extreme end of James Hetfield or Dan Beeler Exciter sort of sound to his vocals. And I found it almost distracting. And really the music is not that much different from I Am the Night. I mean, they haven't really changed their sound very much, even though Phil is in here. So this is not the big demarcation point with this band. But yeah, it's got a hilarious Accept-like song, written by Mark Ferrari, Cold Sweat, right? Mm-hmm. I believe. So it's called Proud to Be Loud, and it sounds like an Accept parody. It's really, really funny. Down Below's it's a punky, frantic one, but again, these annoying vocals. But that one's actually written by the previous guy, Terry Glaze. but yeah, I'm just not crazy about the fact that, I mean, I'm a little surprised they haven't really changed that much when Phil comes in the band, because you always think of Phil as this major force, right? Force of will, force of personality. But when I get to my next choice, you'll see what I mean. But basically, I'm liking this vocalist at this point less than the previous vocalist on my number 6 choice.
There you go. All right, Metal Magic debut from is coming up next for me. Yeah, I mean, everything about this kind of spells like kind of amateurish, but I think it's kind of a fun album. I think as an album of basically teenagers, I think it works really well. And I think it's kind of endearing for a debut, you know. Again, the guitar solos and the riffs, Eddie and Ace all over the place. Some really good songs. Ride My Rocket's kind of fun. I'll Be All Right. The title track I dig quite a bit. Widowmaker is a terrific song. I mean, you can stack that up against anybody from that time period. Really good, really heavy, some great riffs, good hooks. I get a little bit on this album, and it's like, you know, when you go back and listen to these early albums, you can hear all these, and whether the influences or whether the albums just sound like some other bands. But here I hear a little bit of Riot. I hear a little bit of Angel on some of the melody lines. I think Terry Glaze actually sings really well on this album. As an early album from this band as a debut, I think it's a lot of fun, and I kind of give them a little bit of props for, you know, they're so young and it actually turned out pretty good despite, you know, all the things we talked about. So that's my number 7.
Okay, cool. My number 6 is their second album, Projects in the Jungle, July 27th, 1984. And to me, this is the point where Terry Blaze really adopts a Joe Elliott style to his singing. And I think it works great. I think
so it's not just me then who picked up on the Def Leppard thing. Okay.
He sounds really good in that character. I mean, it's, you know, you could say it's his own character or whatever. I mean, he's finding his own voice. But I thought he was a little like flat and a little personality less on the debut. So he does that here, and I think and there is that sort of faster Def Leppard. You know, the heavier end of Def Leppard on this. To me, this is like their high and dry actualization and excitement of creativity versus their on through the night sort of figuring things out. So this is the one that is probably the most Def Leppardist. I find it's the one that has the most charm and the one I'm actually cheering on because I love the whole concept of it. I think all of these records, production-wise, are not terrible. I mean, basically, you know, recording down there in Texas on their own label with their dad, you know, not at a huge California studio or whatever. All these productions are basically 6s to 7s to 7.5s. So I mean, they're not terrible. But yeah, Only a Heartbeat Away, very Joe, very even Ozzy a little bit on that one. Killers is like a fast technical Def Leppard thing. Heavy Metal Rules is like a Dokken one with a big beat on it. The title track is kind of speed metal-y, but Def Leppard. So a little that term we used to use, OTT. So it's like a little bit when Van Halen plays fast too. But yeah, this is the one that I actually found myself just like cheering on the whole concept of the record. It's almost like they had a purpose on it. So I was pleased to pick the second album, you know, a little further up the list.
Yeah. And, you know, and your statement about the production is pretty spot on. I mean, most albums from non-big bands around this time had this kind of little murkiness to it. But we just, that was the norm at the time, right? I mean, so there's really nothing wrong with it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I dig that album. I think it's a fun album, and I like it because it's different than the other ones, and it kind of stands out. I gave my number 6 lots of power metal from '88. Again, like Martin mentioned, this is Phil's first album with the band. He puts in like kind of like a schizophrenic performance on this album. I totally agree with you. I mean, there are times here where it's like he's trying really hard, and we all know he can sing like this, but he's trying hard to do this like Midnight from from Crimson Glory meets Jeff Tate from Queensryche type of thing in spots, and it almost sounds like, did he really need to do that, right? It's just, it sounds a little forced. It's great that he can do it. He obviously has the range to do it, but that's a little weird. But I find this album pretty strong. it's got this kind of like thrashy, almost Judas Priest type of thing going on here. And quite frankly, I think some of the stuff in this album is a little bit heavier than what Priest were doing at the same time. This is 88, right? So we're talking Turbo and Ram It Down. But I like it. I think a lot of good riffs on here. Excuse me. Rock the World is great. Hard Ride, Over and Out, Down Below. Death Trap is another really good song. I dig it. Great guitar tone on this album. I think if you kind of take away the fact that Phil is kind of like all over the place on here, I think Dime sounds incredible here. And I think you really, when you listen to this album and then you know the next album, you kind of like, all right, I think he's taken that next step to go to what we hear on Cowboys from Hell, I think. But I dig it. I think it's a good album. I like all these albums we just talked about, I think are a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny what you say about Phil, you know, that good deep analysis in those comparisons. It's almost like he's you use the words like actorly or hamming it up or melodramatic, right? You know, it's just theatrical, right? It's just like going too far into, I guess, having an enthusiasm for your influences, right?
Yeah, I know. But just did we need him to sound like, you know, Tate Midnight or King Diamond on this album? I don't know, because he doesn't do it throughout the whole album. It's just in spots. And then when you hear it, you're almost kind of like, all right, where'd that come from, right?
Yeah. Okay, so my number 5 is this one, Cowboys from Hell, the first of the Atco albums. They're on a major label. This is July 24th, 1990. This record goes platinum, right? There's our back cover there with the awesome iconic Phil shot, right? So basically on this one, you get this very extreme new sound and really, you know, I think And Justice for All really deserves a lot more credit in terms of like the, you know, where Pantera kind of went. So that production value you got on that record with that you know, lacking bass, really cutting mid-range and kind of a really mechanical drum sound. You get that on this. And as you say, Pete, I mean, it's like a completely different band at this point. But on this one, I think one of the problems and why it's at the bottom of my, you know, Atco years albums is that Phil still is being a little bit too of the exaggerated James Hetfield on this album vocally. I love the title track. I love Psycho Holiday. Never was a big Cemetery Gates fan. And this one almost feels like, you know, the birth of this exciting new sound, but they haven't quite figured it out yet. It's almost like just too harsh and too stripped back. And the arrangements are, you know, there's less going on in the arrangements that we'll see later on. There's some subtleties that they sort of add later on. So yeah, there you go. My number 5, Cowboys from Hell.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go for my number 5, the album that we've already talked about having on this channel, about having one of the worst album covers of all time here. So Reinventing the Steel.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. You know, as a final album, it's quite fine. Yeah. You know, you got this guy in the flames holding a bottle of whiskey. You don't even, you know, they blur out the whiskey, whatever. It's kind of a strange cover, but what it has to do with steel, I don't know.
And
but,
you got to do the explicit language warning thing, right?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm noticing it's not on Cowboys, it's not on Vulgar, but it is on Far Beyond Driven and Great Southern Trendkill. So
parental advisory.
This ruins an album cover, right?
Yeah. Like how many parents back then were actually, you know, nope, Johnny, you're not buying that one. It's got that sticker at the bottom. Sorry.
Yeah. Did it ever work once, right?
Never worked for me, right? You know, I like this album a lot. I think for me anyway, out of all of the Atco years albums, I think it's less consistent than some of the other ones. I do dig it a lot though. Revolution Is My Name is one of my favorite Pantera songs of all time, and it's on here. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Hellbound, Goddamn Electric is great. I'll Cast a Shadow is absolutely terrific. Death Rattle, there's some great songs on here. The songs that I have not mentioned, though, I'm okay with, but I think those to me are really strong. The rest is okay. I like this album. I can't say anything bad about it. I just think I like the other ones better.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. This is very frustrating. This is what I had a hard time with these last ones, and I knew it was like this before, and it was just confirmed when I went through them carefully. So basically, my number 4 I went with the Great Southern Trendkill for basically no reason whatsoever. You know, literally, these are all, the last four for me are very close to a tie, and three of them sound really, really similar. I mean, I consider Vulgar a little bit of an outlier from the last four, but so we're into that situation. So this is 96. This is probably at the nadir of them, you know, not getting along, and possibly the heroin problems and all that kind of stuff. I think this is when it was probably quite dire for them at this point. But basically, it sounds quite a bit like your previous choice. And what I find with these records is I pull out songs that I really, really love on them, like Living Through Me, Hell's Wrath in parentheses, War Nerve, I super like. Don't like the title track very much. Drag the Waters is kind of this one's walk. But what I find is that, and I did an episode of my History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff podcast called Strictly Commercial recently. And I talked about Genesis, King Crimson, Frank Zappa, who else? Grateful Dead, and Pantera. And the reason I did that is because I'm just like a poser Pantera fan in a way that give me the money riff, give me the mid-pace headbanging money riff. Don't give me the psychedelic, slow, depressive, you know, heavy version of Planet Caravan, obviously, which they covered in just a normal light version. The psychedelic, don't give me that stuff. Don't give me the fast stuff either, because the fast stuff with Pantera, they seem to just want to have hardcore cred. And it's almost like a parody of playing fast, just like I always talk about Frank Zappa's guitar soloing, or Jay Mascis being a parody of shredding or making a lot of noise, even C.C. DeVille for that matter. But basically, when they play fast, it almost seems like a link part to get to the next cool money riff. And that's what I want them to do. And so that's why I love the catchiest songs Pantera ever did across these Atco years. That's what I like from them, right? So that's what happens with these records. I really like 3 or 4 songs. They're amazing anthems to me. And then the rest, I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear the super atonal stuff. I don't want to hear the Dime screeching stuff. I don't like Dime as a guitar soloist. I think he's one of the greatest riff writers of all time, and producer and songwriter. But when it gets to the solos, they're just punishing to me. I don't want to hear that screechy thing he does, or any of that, any of the experimental stuff, really. I mean, I am just basically your poser Pantera fan that wants to rock out to the mid-paced songs that have groove. And that's kind of my pattern that you're going to hear for the rest of this episode.
Man, you know, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but you took the words right out of my mouth.
Okay.
I find with most of these albums, most of them are pretty long, a lot of songs, and I usually half of them I love, and the other half I'm kind of indifferent to. I agree with you. I don't like when they're trying to do this kind of weird hardcore type thing. I know that they have a lot of, well, I supposedly have a lot of roots there, but I tend to love the mid-paced stuff with those massive riffs that, like you said, have a lot of groove, and those are the songs that I like. And I find like a lot that album, I have number 4, the same with you, Great Southern Trendkill. It's the same thing. There's like a handful of songs I just can't get enough of, and the other half I'm kind of like, all right, this is okay. Not really what I prefer from this band. You know, I love Drag the Waters. Can we get some more cowbell, please? Love the riff. The title track is decent. The Eerie Tens is kind of cool. 13 Steps to Nowhere. I dig the 2-part Suicide Note. Floods has some, you know, yeah, when it comes to his solos, some of them I really dig a lot. And others I'm kind of like, it's kind of noisy. I like the solo in Floods is really, really cool. It's kind of like a weird song anyway. But I think that there are some crushing riffs on this album. It's a pretty extreme album, which I think, you know, most of these albums are. But I'm just finding that on all these albums, I rarely listen to all of them all the way through. I tend to skip around quite a bit. And it's weird to say that about a band you really dig a lot, right? But
yeah.
And I think this is a great album cover. Doesn't get more sinister than that, right? Rattlesnake, yeah.
Yeah. Cool, awesome, yeah. Okay, so my number 3, Reinventing the Steel. For all the same reasons. Revolution is my name, just like you, Pete. One of my favorite Pantera songs of all time, as is Yesterday Don't Mean Shit. And I really like We'll Grind That Axe for a long time as well. Another mid-paced one. A lot of rhythmic pummeling on this. So this is 2000, March 21st, 2000. It only went gold. They're on this platinum streak, right? But I just love the fact that they've really sort of this is the end. So this is when there's the most finesse when it comes to the production. It's still, they never abandoned that sound that they came up with on Cowboys. They just kind of got better and better at it. So there's a lot of cool little nuances and rhythmic things going on. But I was never a big Goddamn Electric fan. I mean, it's got some hilarious lines from Phil in it, but again, it's just got that dissonant, wacky sort of almost like their version of progressive rock, or their version of demo tapes of riffs where you go shopping and try to figure out what you want to do, but they don't seem to be great songs all the time, right? A lot of parts on, like It Makes Them Disappear and I'll Cast a Shadow. Doomy, I'm not crazy when they do the doomy stuff, because they do have that sort of like, when they do the slow doomy stuff, you think of that stomping around in a mosh pit in circles thing, right? And they love their Sabbath, and doomy is kind of like drugged out or hungover or whatever, lacking energy. Like there's these vibes that they're trying to create when they're doomy, these depressive atmospheric things. And it is another version of being extreme. Like Pantera is a very extreme sounding band, but again, the poser in me says, give me the most commercial Pantera you can possibly give me, and I'm a completely happy headbanger, right? That's what I want out of this band. So yeah, Reinventing the Steel, my number 3.
Yeah, quite frankly, I like when Phil does Doom in Down. That's because I love Down. And yeah, I mean, I don't dislike when Pantera dabbles in it from time to time, but I never got the impression that Dime is the perfect guitar player for that. Right. Could he have been? I don't know. Hard to say. Yeah. All right, my number 3, I'm going to go with Cowboys from Hell from 1990. Huge Terry Date production on here. And again, we talked about the big shift in sound, right? This is sounds like a completely different band to the album that came before it. I think Dime sounds terrific on this album. To me, this album is all about his guitar tone and those riffs. And there's a handful, again, another one of those albums where there's a handful of songs that are just mandatory Pantera on here. Cemetery Gates, the title track, Primal Concrete Sludge, Psycho Holiday, Domination, The Art of Shredding, right there. Great songs. The rest of it's pretty strong. And here you got Phil, not quite unleashed like we'll see him on the next album, but I think pretty closer to what the true Phil ensemble is. And I dig it. It's a good album. It's funny. We're here talking about how we have these select Pantera tracks from each album that for us are like mandatory songs. I once had, years ago, I don't remember when, they either put it out right after they broke up or something like that. There was a Pantera compilation that I wound up buying years ago that had I think 15 songs on it. That compilation is probably one of the greatest albums of all time because it has all the songs that we're talking about on it. Right? You take all of these songs that we're talking about from all these albums, you put it on one album, there's not a better album ever made.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's funny. The joy of doing these episodes or writing about bands or being a DJ, I often sort of think what the coolest thing that could probably happen in Pantera's life, and I often daydream about this, right? That when you say the band goes down to headquarters of the record label, and you brought your new music, and you get shuffled into the boardroom, and there's a nice stereo set up, and there's 5 or 6 label people there. I often think when Queen had Bohemian Rhapsody and got to sit down in a boardroom, I'm not saying this ever happened, but to play it for the label. Or when Aerosmith had Walk This Way, to sit down and play it for the label. Imagine Pantera walking in and playing that opening sequence to the title track from Cowboys from Hell in a boardroom, on a really nice stereo, fairly loud, with a whole huge table surrounded by guys. And imagine the jaws dropping when you hear that, that repeated cool, that just one of the greatest riffs of all time, right? And that production, it literally was the invention of a new kind of music.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I've talked to him about this before. So Derek Schulman, the former
Yeah.
singer from Gentle Giant, signed these guys. And, you know, and we're talking about a prog rock guy, finds these guys, brings them to the label, right? And so he had to have, even though it may not be his thing, he had to have seen and heard, it's like, these guys have it, right?
Yeah.
And this is pretty, you know, pretty out there and pretty extreme for the time, right? For a major label signing. But you just imagine him walking in with these guys, like, all right, let's hear what we got here, right? I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, and I've interviewed him about it too, and Terry Date and the Pantera guys, and it's like I can't remember the answers. Like I was thinking this morning before we decided to do this, it's like what was there? Why did they come up with this sound? I couldn't remember the answer, right? Because I've talked to various people about it, and I for the life of me can't because to me as an outsider, as I said earlier, it would have been right and Justice for All. This came from And Justice for All. But I don't know if they ever came out and really admitted that, or even they were doing that, you know, Too Cool grunge thing where they were basically saying, you can't go out and admit exactly where you got this stuff from, right? There's a bit of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't an evolution. It wasn't evolution at all. I mean, those first 4 records sound essentially the same, and then boom, they have a different band.
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
All right. So my number 2, I'm going to go with Vulgar Display of Power. I was going to put this my number 1, but as I played this again with this new, you know, germ of a thought in my mind that Phil's vocals are bothering me on power metal, and they're still bothering me a little on Cowboys. I played this and go, you know what? They're still bothering me a little bit on this one. But this is obviously, it's their biggest album. It went double platinum. It's got the most anthems on it. You can't beat the first 5 songs. I mean, talk about, this is almost like Rush Moving Pictures side 1, right? Mouth for War, A New Level, Walk, and fucking Hostile. And This Love. I mean, all hits, right? All big hits, all in a row, just killing you, right? Just great riffs, great songwriting. So this is them coming into their own the same way I figure the second album of theirs is coming into their own with that original sound. This pairs up with Cowboys for me. It's just a better Cowboys to me. So that's why I've got it here. But yeah, I moved my first and second around, and like I say, frankly, my third and fourth, it's just that they're so close to each other and they sound so similar. But this one doesn't sound as similar as their last 3 albums, I don't think.
I totally agree.
I think this is a bridge record from Cowboys. But you know, I think most people would argue that it's probably got their best songwriting on it. So there you go.
Yep, that's my number 2 as well. And I had a hard time. My top 2 were like really close, and I was like, oh man. But I think, you know, sometimes it comes down to which one do you listen to more? Which one, when you go to reach for a Pantera album, which one's the one that's your go-to? And that's why I went with the other one that we're going to get to in a second. But I agree with it. I also think this album has perhaps the biggest hardcore influence in a lot of the songs. If you look at the songs other than the ones you mentioned, the big hit songs, I think there's a lot of hardcore influence on this album. And I do want to mention, because it's another one of my favorite Pantera songs of all time, is By Demons Be Driven, which I think is absolutely skull crushing. And I just love it, love it, love it. Hollow's another great song. And how about that kick-ass cover, right? It just doesn't get much more metal than that, right? Yeah. And here you got the guys in the back looking pretty, you know,
varied.
Yeah.
Varied, right? Phil's there. He's got his Mind Over 4 shirt, which is kind of like an underground proggy metal band, a little bit grungy. Cool band those guys were, right? And then the other guys, they still got kind of their old look, right? I mean, it's a little bit, they're just down home Texas boys, right?
Yeah, I mean, the brothers could a bunch of Southern rock guys, right? And Rex is just kind of like hanging out there. He's got his hat on backwards. Yeah, whatever. I don't know.
Little Faith No More vibe to it too, right?
Yep. A great album though, and another really good production from Mr. Date on that.
Yeah, a good deep track on that is also where is it here? No Good, right? Attack for the Radical. That's a good deep one too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
The whole album's good, and the production on this is probably the production on this is probably the strongest of the they're all similar, but it's got probably the best of the slightly analog feel, if you could even call it that, right? It's really not, but but it just feels like a more powerful version of the Cowboys production, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So my number one, I went with Far Beyond Driven. There we go. And so did you, obviously. It's the only one left, right? So I saw the band on this tour, and it was one of the most amazing concerts I've ever seen. They played Maple Leaf Gardens here in Toronto. They were a headliner. That's the big hockey arena, right? And I was trying to think of this morning, and I couldn't remember who. There you go with the the blue jewel case on it, right? I couldn't remember who the support act was. I was going to look it up, but great album cover too. I just love that mix of the rusty brown and the blue, and the drill going through his head. But so basically, this has Becoming, which I love, 5 Minutes Alone, which is great. I'm Broken, Slaughtered, Use My Third Arm. Which is kind of, it's a little faster, it's frantic, but it's also experimental. I think this is the first one where this is them completely at the top of the world in terms of like leading heavy metal in the 90s. They were way cooler than Metallica at this point. They didn't have to be bigger, but they were cooler. I mean, basically, this is them as the it band. Like nobody was better than Pantera at this point. They're getting a little more extreme. They're a little brave. It's a little bit their Angel Dust versus their The Real Thing, because it's not Vulgar over again. It's a little more atmospheric. It's a little crazier. Everybody's a little nuttier, right? The heavy stuff is more violent. The mellow stuff is more mellow and weird and spooky. So it's just one of these where you felt that that it's a dangerous album. It's way more dangerous than Vulgar. So, but yeah, later on you've got Hardline, Sunken Cheeks, a little more slow and psychedelic. Throes of Rejection is a killer riff, but then things change. That happens a lot in Pantera songs. You like 3 or 4 things in it, and you don't like 3 or 4 things in it. That happens a lot. And this went platinum, like one of the most extreme records ever to go platinum, I would say. So there you go. That's my number one.
Yeah, and I think we need to mention too, I mean, in 1994, metal is not doing big business. So Pantera is one of arguably 2 or 3 acts that are still selling lots of records, selling out tours, and just, really one of the few that are in the eye of the general public, because alternative and grunge is still kind of riding high at this point, and metal has kind of sunk back into the underground. So here
a lot of excitement about Machine Head at this time too, right?
Yeah.
Machine Head, I think it's 94.
Yep. But yeah, I love Dime's tone on this album. I think the riffs are absolutely incredible, and it has some of my favorite songs. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of them: 5 Minutes Alone, Becoming, I'm Broken, Hardline, Sunken Cheeks, Strength Beyond Strength, 25 Years, Shedding Skin, Throes of Rejections. Those are all great songs. It's like the album could have ended right there, and I'd be completely happy. I just think that these 2 are easily my favorites, but I tend to always reach for this one a little bit more, and it's definitely pretty extreme for like a big selling album and a big selling band. That's very cool. You got to see them live on that tour, because I only saw them ever once. I saw them open up for Black Sabbath on the reunion tour a couple of years later. And they were really good, but you could sense that there was like kind of something going on there, right? Band probably not getting along the drugs and all that kind of stuff, but they were not as tight as I would have liked to. But I would imagine on this tour probably was absolutely amazing.
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to say I was racking my brains and thinking, did I ever see Pantera ever again? I mean, I saw Down on a big support thing in the same place. Actually, it might have been Air Canada Center by that point. Because in Toronto, the old one closed down. It's not just a name change, right? The old one closed down. They had a new one. But I definitely saw them on that, and we got to hang with them backstage, which was awesome. And also same situation at a club, pretty big club, 1,000 people. This was Down. We get to hang with them again. And Damage Plan I saw. But I actually, for the life of me, can't remember if I ever saw Pantera ever again. It's interesting you say they supported Sabbath, because that makes me think I might have seen them on that. But this happens to me a lot, where I can't remember whether I saw bands, how many times I saw bands. I get asked that all the time, right? So I
have to keep track sometimes. For me, especially, I've seen a ton of concerts, but thankfully I've saved most of my ticket stuff. So if ever I don't know, I just go and I kind of look through. But yeah, that was the one and only time for me. I don't know why. For me, the 90s, I got pretty fed up with what was going on with metal, because popular music in the 90s I had no interest in whatsoever. So I went back and started listening to more older stuff, and I got hugely into progressive rock in the 90s. And I didn't start getting back into metal again until probably right at the end of the 90s as we moved into the 2000s. So weird decade for me. So that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't go see them play any of their headline shows, but oh well, kind of late now, right?
Yeah, and an amazing band live too. I mean, they just tore up the place, right? It's incredible they could pull that stuff off the way Dime moved around on stage, right?
Yeah,
that right, and yeah, they were really good live. For sure.
Yeah. So there you have it, everybody. Ranking the albums of Pantera. From Martin Popoff and myself, we got 9. Feel free to rank them as you like them in the comments below, or give us your top 5 or whatever, or rank the newer ones. But I urge everybody, if you can, they're all available here on YouTube. Go listen to those first 4 albums. They're pretty cool, actually. And I think as a part of Pantera history, it's almost like you have to kind of explore those and check them out, whether you think they're as good or whatever as the later ones, whatever. But they're definitely a nice curiosity factor when you talk about this band. And there's a lot to like there. Yeah. But as long as you go in knowing that you're going to get something completely different, because you are. But they're really not glam albums. I want to stress that. I don't find that they're glam albums at all. Whatever glam is these days, right? That people say. So
anyway. They're poverty metal. That's that term that I came up with years ago, and I keep using it because when I think of all that shrapnel stuff and all that Metal Blade stuff, a lot of the smaller bands, all the small stuff, it's basically the proto power metal thing, right? The American version of power metal, which starts with your Dios and your metal churches and all that kind of stuff. That's the good end, the professional end of it. But there are all these bands that are just doing this stuff in the middle. It's not thrash, it's not glam, it's heavier than glam, it's not as heavy as thrash, it's all in the middle, and that's what you get all over those Pantera.
Yeah. Good classic American US metal, right? That's what it is. Yeah. So cool. So everybody, make sure you visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. Check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Martin, you got anything you want to plug today?
Not really. I mean, I'm waiting today with bated breath. I'm getting 4 reprints delivered today. So I'll have the Merciful Fate again. I'll have the third of the Thrash trilogy today. I'll have more of Holy Smoke, so I can now supply the entire Iron Maiden trilogy again. And what did I say? Merciful, Holy Smoke. Van Halen. My Van Halen Unchained Van Halen user manual. I ran out of that, so I get 100 copies of that today.
Cool. I am about 80% through your Limelight book, your Rush book. So folks here on the channel can expect my review of that probably over sometime later this week. So I'm almost done with that. That's another entertaining read. You have done a fine job on these Rush books, excellent. I will say. Yeah. So take care, everybody. Have a good one. And we'll see you tonight for the Hudson Valley Squares with another one of our rants, and back again tomorrow, of course. So take care, everybody. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Goodbye.